Hey gang, it's Bryan from FXBilliards. Today I'm going to tell you all you need to know about low deflection cues.
Number one, what is a low deflection cue? A low deflection cue is a cue that is designed to take squirt out of your shot. What exactly does that mean? It means when you get down on a cue ball, most of the time, you are not hitting that ball in true center, even if you're trying to. Now, most top players are usually above or below the center line, but let's just say you're trying to hit the ball in the center. What's going to happen is you're going to be a little off. I don't care how good you are. Now, of course, the better you are, the more expertise you have, and the longer you've been playing, the more likely you are to hit that ball in the center. But the reality is you're going to be a little off to the left or right. A standard deflection cue is what most people just call a pull cue, is going to take that ball and squirt it to the opposite side of where you're hitting it. So if you are, let's say, accidentally hitting it on the left-hand side, it's going to squirt to the right. And if you're hitting it on the right-hand side, it's going to squirt to the left. What a low deflection cue does is it reduces the amount of that squirt or deflection that occurs. Now, deflection, in most cases, for most of you, is going to be so subtle, you're not going to see it. You're going to just think of it as, hey, I missed a shot. That's what low deflection cues do. They keep that ball from squirting out quite as much. It means that on all of your shots, whether you're putting unintentional or intentional spin on the ball is going to travel straighter. I'm not going to get into all the mechanics of cue making because I'm not an expert on all the mechanics of cue making, but I will tell you the basics. One of the things that makes a low deflection cue low deflection is the fact that the cue is hollowed out, which makes it a little bit lighter, especially at the tip, which allows it to absorb some of the energy from that strike, and it's not pushing the ball quite as hard. The other thing that may happen is that you will find a smaller ferrule on the end of the cue, in some cases almost no ferrule. You're usually going to be mounting your cue with a soft tip, will also, not as much as other things, but also take up some of that deflection. All of those things combined in the manufacturing process, particularly where the cue is hollow and much lighter inside, are some of the things that take the cost up. It is not a simple thing. I know a lot of you, especially the cynical ones that I talk to in the comments all the time, you think that companies just pop these out at $25 and then sell them for $350 or $500. That is not the case. The manufacturing process on a low deflection cue is much more intense. It's usually much better quality than a standard deflection cue. So now that we've brought cost into the conversation, let's talk about the difference between a $200 shaft that calls itself low deflection and a $500 shaft that calls itself low deflection. All low deflection cues are not the same. The amount of deflection that you get, the amount of quality that you get, the amount of research and development that went into it, patents, all of these things differ. And they differ a lot. Just like a Mazda Miata is called a sports car and a Porsche 911 is called a sports car, these are not even the same species. And the same thing occurs with cues. If you get a $200 low deflection cue, you can bet that the deflection is still going to be a lot greater than is going to be with a more expensive, more quality, better made low deflection cue. Be careful when you're looking at budget low deflection cues, because low deflection for one person looks like this and another looks like this. So there is a big difference between a good quality high-end low deflection cue and something that calls itself low deflection. You get a lot more consistency with a low deflection cue, especially if you're not finding the center of that ball, which most of you that are beginners are going to have a hard time doing. The other thing is you will most likely, as time goes on, go and purchase a low deflection cue. And the transition from standard deflection to low deflection can be frustrating for some guys. Now, I do have a student that just started in the game, and I got him on a relatively inexpensive pool cue that was considered low deflection, but not as low deflection as something like a Predator 314 or a Predator Revo. And we're going to transition him into a higher end low deflection cue. But the reality is, I wanted him to experience the standard deflection as we learned, because he was learning from just about a month into the game, and he could afford just about any cue he wanted. So we did start with something that was closer to standard deflection, and we're going to work him into a Predator Revo or a 314 or something higher end. So you can do it, but keep in mind the cost of these cues is going to be very high. Some of you that are absolute beginners, literally just started playing in the last month or so, be careful about spending a lot of money on this game. A really good pool cue can cost $700 to $7,000, and you don't even know if you like pool yet. A lot of people have treadmills sitting in the corner that they did 2 miles on and never got on before. A lot of people have pool tables in their basements that have the cover on them for the last 5 years because they lost interest in the game. So make sure you are committed to the game, committed to watching the videos, reading the books, taking lessons, all of the things that are going to make you a better player, or you will be wasting a lot of money. Now, I'm not here to tell you what to do with your money, but I am an economics guy, and I will tell you this: blowing cash on expensive equipment and losing interest in the game doesn't make any sense at all. The good news is if you bought a really good quality product, you can probably sell it at a decent price, where some of these lower end cues, you know, a $300 carbon fiber cue that you can get almost brand new on eBay for $150 is not holding its value. So something to keep in mind. The next thing I want to talk about is transitioning. Let's say you're a guy who's been playing pool for 20, 30 years, you've been using standard deflection, and you're like, that damn Bryan Mitchell, he keeps talking about this low deflection, he's got me wanting a Revo, he's got me doing this and that, and you want to make the transition. You can transition 10 times easier from a standard cue to a low deflection cue than you can in the opposite direction. What's the right way to transition? Don't go back and forth. That's a bad idea. Don't say, well, I'm going to work my way into this low deflection thing. You need to practice with and play with only your new low deflection cue until you are totally used to it. Going back and forth is not going to work. Now, I unfortunately bought mine in the middle of competition season, so I was playing with standard deflection and practicing with low deflection, and that is a really bad idea. It is very complex, it's very complicated to do, to constantly make that adjustment back and forth, and it's going to take your learning curve with the low deflection back a step or two. So go cold turkey, low deflection only, get your reps in, and it'll be the easiest transition you ever made. So what are the disadvantages of a low deflection cue? We already talked about them. Number one, they cost more. In some cases, 3 times more. But on the flip side, they hold their value. Number two, the learning curve for guys that have been playing with standard deflection. If you've been playing with standard deflection and you use a lot of spin on the balls, you are going to have probably more time to adjust for that cue. But I have students that have been playing the game for 25, 30 years and just recently went out and bought low deflection cues, and a week later they're playing like they've had it in their hands all their lives. So there is a learning curve, but it is a very short learning curve, especially if you commit to putting in the reps and getting that taken care of. Some guys don't like the sound of low deflection cues, particularly some carbon fiber low deflection cues. The low deflection cues can sound kind of tangy, for lack of a better word, to some players. And that's because the shaft is lighter, it's hollowed out inside, it has a different sound to it when you hit the ball. Now, if the sound of a cue hitting the ball bothers you, you might want to look at getting into another game, because there's a lot of sounds in a pool. I don't know where you guys play, but I'm not playing in the library. I don't even notice the sound of my cues when I'm playing. As far as the tip size you go with, the brand, whether it's going to be carbon fiber or wood, all of these things boil down to personal preference. I can't pick for you. If you get an opportunity to try different things, go ahead and do it. My personal preference: Predator Revo carbon fiber shaft, 12.4 millimeter tip, Victory soft tip. All of my cues are set at 19 ounces. Those are all Predator cues. All of them are set at 19 ounces, including my break cue. I tend to have wraps on all of my cues, which is funny because I hold the cue way in the back because of my height, the way I grew up playing and stuff like that. But I always have some wrap on my cues, except for maybe nothing over there. What you're going to do is try to get in some reps with different types of cues if you're new to this. That's all I have for you today. Hit me in the comments. Always hit me in the comments and let me know what you think. Let me know what you're considering and what you have right now, and I'll talk to you later. Don't forget to subscribe.
Wow.